Hey everyone. So it's been less than 24 hours since I last published my last video on YouTube, and I did post the video link in the Digimon Facebook group, or like a couple of groups, and it has some pretty good reception. So I felt inspired, and I just really wanted to make an EX2 legal version of the deck that I plan on making for BT10. So, of course, because we don't have the BT10, BT9 cards yet, I can't run the Yellow Tamers from BT9, and I think that the Yellow Tamers that we currently have are subpar for this deck. So, although Spiral Masquerade is really good, I'm leaving Spiral Masquerade and Yellow Tamers out, and because we don't have Cherrymon BT10, I'm not making this deck as defensive as the other decks. I'm making this deck very offensive. It's like straight on offense. It's just very aggro. So if you haven't watched my previous video, I'm going to leave the link in the description. But basically, I made a deck for BT10. It uses a bunch of cheap level 4s, level 5s that have Digisorption, level 6s, of course. So the plan is to go very quickly into your level 6s, Spiral Masquerade for removal. I'm planning on using TK Takaishi and Izumi. It's just a really good... it's just one of the better Yellow Tamers to put into this deck. Two Davis Momiyas. I did make a YouTube video about this. I think that I'm taking out the Takumi Aibas. But yeah, this was like basically my YouTube video. I'll put a link to this video in the description. But for this deck, since I want to make it EX2 legal, I decided to make it without any BT9, any BT10 cards. And this, I kind of like the direction that I'm going with this deck. I have tested out a couple of versions, and I think that I like this one the best. So let me walk you through this version. I'm running... Oh, there's that weird banner again. So unfortunately I can't zoom in all the way. So I'm running 4 copies of Roachmon. Let me actually try. Is the banner still there? Okay, cool. The banner has disappeared. So I'm running 4 copies of Roachmon. It's just a 3 costs, level 4, 3000 DP. Nothing too special about it. It's cheap. It's level 4, so I'm pretty much on playing it. So if you haven't seen my last video before, I am playing a full playset of Mother D Reaper. I'm not playing a D Reaper deck, but I'm splashing in Mother D Reaper. So basically, turn 1, hatch Mother D Reaper. Turn 2, promote Mother D Reaper. So every 2 turns, you can bring out another Mother D Reaper onto your field. So starting from turn 2, you can use Mother D Reaper as suspension fodder for Digisorption or for Samadhi Santi, and I will go through that all in a second. And then 4 copies of Kiwimon. So Kiwimon is a 4 cost, level 4 on play. Reveal 3 cards from the top of your deck. Add all Digimon cards with Digisorption among them to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck at the bottom of your deck in any order. 4 copies of Parasaurmon. 3 costs, 5000 DP, level 4. So Roachmon, Parasaurmon were pretty much a given. Because I'm not playing any green Digi-Eggs, it doesn't really... Oh, there's that weird banner again. So I'm not playing any green Digi-Eggs. I can't really Digivolve off of them. So it made sense to just skip the rookie step, go straight into my champions. So Roachmon, Parasaurmon are cheap on play. Kiwimon, although it is a tad more expensive, is the next best champion that we currently have. I think that even after BT10 releases, I think that Kiwimon is just a staple in this deck, because when Kiwimon on plays, you add all the Digisorption cards that you reveal from the top 3 cards of your deck into your hand. And because you are playing a fair amount of Digisorption, I expect that on most of the time you're going to draw 1 or 2 cards. Lobomon, level 4. So I'm just splashing in Lobomon for game. After you have a Davis or a Matashita on the field, so you can just Digivolve for 2, swing your opponent, and Lobomon might give you the extra swing that you need to close the game out. Argomon and Blossomon, they're both level 5s. They cost 3 to Digivolve, but they have Digisorption -3. So Argomon can Digisorption -3, Blossomon can Digisorption -3, so they effectively cost 0 to Digivolve. So here's the play that I imagine. So turn 1, hatch Mother D Reaper, and then you play one of your champions. Doesn't really matter which champion you play, but turn 2 comes around after your opponent is done with their turn 1. So after they're done with their turn 1, then you can bring out the Mother D Reaper. Mother D Reaper is now out, so you can Digisorption off of your Mother D Reaper. So you suspend Mother D Reaper, you Digivolve for 0 into Argomon or 0 into Blossomon. You still have the memory left over, so you can go into your level 6. And I'm going to discuss the level 6 options I chose for this deck when I get to them. Pissmon is also pretty good. It costs 3 to Digivolve. Unfortunately, its Digisorption is only -2, so it still costs 1 memory to Digivolve into, even after Digisorption. Its inherited effect, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP for each of your other suspended Digimon. I don't suspect that this will come into... This won't be that handy, but it will be handy enough for, just in case you... So what I'm trying to get at is I don't really care about the inherited effect. It's basically just a bonus. So if it does come up and you need it, then it's good. But I'm not really running this for the effect. I'm running this mainly because it has Digisorption and it's level 5. 2 copies of Cherrymon from BT2. It has blocker. The blocker might come in handy, but I'm running this card mainly because its Digivolution cost is only 2. So it's really cheap, and if you don't draw into one of these other level 5s, then you can still Digivolve for 2. So let's go into my level 6s. Why am I running these level 6s? GranKuwagamon, I think, is probably the best level 6 that you currently have for this build. Again, this deck is very aggressive. So, because GranKuwagamon only Digivolves for 3, if you have a Davis Momiya on field, and then you get set to 3, you can Digivolve into GranKuwagamon and then swing for 2 security checks, and it has 4000 DP for the turn that Digivolves. It has 4000 more, so it has 15,000 DP for the turn it Digivolves. So here's an example play. You have Davis Momiya on field, you have one of your champions on field at the start of your turn. So you get set to 3 memory because of Davis Momiya. You Digivolve into Blossomon or Argomon by suspending one of your Mother D Reapers, so you Digivolve for 0 into your level 5. Reminder that you still have the 3 memory left over from Davis Momiya that you did not touch into yet. And then from your level 5, you Digivolve into GranKuwagamon. And then you go to 0 memory, it's still your turn, you swing your opponent 15,000 DP, 2 security checks. So because this is such an aggro-focused deck, I wanted to play in GranKuwagamon. It doesn't really matter what your opponent has on the field, it doesn't matter if they have a Digimon or not. GranKuwagamon has no strings attached to its security attack +1, so it's going to swing for 2 security checks, 15,000 DP on the turn it Digivolves. Now, if you Digivolve into Pissmon or Cherrymon, then you might want to wait another turn before Digivolving into GranKuwagamon. You know, if you still have the Davis Momi out, you can just wait an extra turn, Digivolve then. The good thing about Cherrymon is it does have blocker, so sometimes you do want it to sit on the field for a while. If you do have Davis Momia and you have a Hammer Spark, you can Hammer Spark going into Pistamon for 1 memory from your champions, and then because you gained the memory, then you're back at 3 memory, and then you can still Digivolve into GranKuwagamon, swing your opponent for 2 checks, 15,000 DP. So this lineup seems really good to me. For these other megas, I chose their ratios for very specific reasons. So Hercules Kabuterimon is probably the next best mega that you can have. It has Piercing, Digiburst 2. When you, during your main phase, you may Digiburst 2 to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. So because you are playing from level 4 to level 5 to level 6, it's going to have 2 sources under it, so it can Digiburst 2. Because you're going into your megas so quickly, by the time that you are able to go into Hercules Kabuterimon, I suspect that your opponent will have rookies, champions, ultimates. So they probably are not at their mega stage yet. And even if you're really lucky, that it could be like 11,000 DP and lower. But they probably will be at level 5s and lower when you Digivolve into Hercules Kabuterimon. So because of that, you can add pressure to their field by chipping away at their resources while still swinging at their security. I think that Hercules Kabuterimon is really good because, you know, they probably have a rookie or a champion or an ultimate. Most definitely 12,000 DP or lower. You suspend it, you swing into it, you pierce them, so you remove their resources, both Digimon and security stack. So I think that Hercules Kabuterimon is very good. And then later on, after you have already Digiburst 2, you do have Samadhi Santi to fall back on. So Samadhi Santi, you may suspend one of your Digimon to suspend one of your opponent's Digimon or Tamers. Your opponent's card suspend with this effect can't unsuspend during the end of their next turn. So Samadhi Santi is pretty good. So you pretty much use Mother D Reaper again as fodder. So you suspend Mother D Reaper, it doesn't really hurt you because Mother D Reaper exists in this deck solely for you to suspend Mother D Reaper. So you suspend Mother D Reaper, you suspend one of your opponent's Digimon, and then because Hercules Kabuterimon still has Piercing, you can just swing over it. So this functions as a removal card in this deck. This Samadhi Santi is here mainly for removal, or for you to swing around your opponent. It also works defensively by stopping your opponent from swinging at you next turn. This card is just all around really good. Mega Gargamon is probably the next best Mega. So while Digivolving, suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. It doesn't unsuspend during your opponent's next unsuspend phase. While your opponent has a suspended Digimon in play, this Digimon gains security attack +1. So when you're Digivolving, you suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. Hopefully they have a Digimon, but because you are bringing out your Megas so quickly, they might not have one. Because this card's effect is so dependent on your opponent's board, I want to limit it to just 1. I didn't want to run 2 of these. If it really matters for the opponent's effect, or the opponent's board state for this card to get the security attack +1, I didn't want to run more than 1 of this. It is a really good effect. It is dependent on your opponent's board state though, because you are going into your Megas so quickly in this deck. You can bring this out on a really early turn. If your opponent has no Digimon in play, then the effect is basically useless for you. It doesn't activate, you don't get the security attack +1. It's basically an 11,000 DP vanilla. So I did not want 2 copies of this. It has a really good effect though, but just because this deck advances to Megas so quickly, you might not see any Digimon in your opponent's field. Same thing for Imperial Dramon Fighter mode. So I admittedly am running Fire mode because I wanted to have another blue Digimon just in case I get a Davis Momiya on play, and then I can search the top 3 cards in my deck for a blue and a green. So I do have 3 Lobomon, but I do want another blue Digimon, just to increase my chances of revealing 3 cards and then finding a blue Digimon in one of the 3. So this does increase my chances of that. I again didn't want to run 2 of these because, just like with the Mega Gargamon reasoning, because you are able to Digivolve so quickly in this game to your Megas, this card could basically whiff its when Digivolving ability if your opponent does not have a Digimon out on the field. Like, you are able to get this out super quickly. But if they don't have a Digimon out for you to bounce back, then its one Digivolving effect is basically whiffed, and it's just an expensive level 6 to bring out. Rosemon, I think that this is pretty good. I did splash into Matt Ishida's in this deck, mostly so then I can have a Tamer out when Digivolving into Rosemon. Has Digisorption -2, so it can be searched for with Kuwagamon. When Digivolving, if you have a Tamer in play, one of your opponent's Digimon can't attack or block until the end of their next turn, so it basically stuns one of their Digimon. I take it back. Mega Gargamon was not the next best Mega. Rosemon is the next best one. That's why I'm running 2 Rosemons in this deck. So it can be searched for with Kuwagamon. It is also kind of dependent on your opponent having a Digimon out and you having a Tamer out. But because I threw in the 2 Matt Ishidas and because I have 5 Tamers, I think that it's going to be pretty reliable for me to have a Tamer out when Digivolving into Rosemon. Even if I don't have a Tamer out, it only costs 2 to Digivolve into. So I think that running 2 Rosemon is good. I don't think the Mega Gargamon and Imperial Dramon Fighter Mode are that reliable for me to run 2. This is not because their effects are bad, but I'm choosing these Digimon based on their reliability and the consistency that I expect to see from my opponent when they're just starting out the game. We've been over Samadhi Santi, Ice Wall, Hammer Spark. Hammer Spark is to extend my plays, so as we've seen before, some of these Megas cost 4 to Digivolve. So if you start your turn at 3, you might want that extra memory just to bring you up to 4, and then Digivolve going into 0. So you still have the turn because of the Hammer Spark. So you are able to get that extra attack in, which is pretty useful in this deck. Ice Wall. I don't think that it's that useful, but it does have a really nice security effect where you can gain 2 memory, and then you it's going to disrupt your opponent's plans, definitely. But when attacking, lose 2 memory for your opponent's Digimon, it could be useful. I don't think that's too useful in this deck, but it's there if you're in a pinch and you do find it useful to use. But this is mainly there for the security, but I could be wrong. It really depends on what deck you're playing against. 3 Davises. So this is mainly Memory Setter, giving you the option to use blue option cards. So because you have Davis Momiya, you can use Ice Wall, Hammer Spark. I had considered throwing in another Davis Momiya, but I think that 3 is good enough. I chose to throw in 2 Matt Ishidas instead. But anyways, on play, reveal top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 blue and 1 green Digimon among them to your hand. So because you are running predominantly green, you are playing 4 blue cards. I think that most of the time you're going to be able to add 1 card to your hand. Sometimes you are lucky and you reveal a blue and a green, so you can add 2 Digimon to your hand. But yeah, Davis is pretty good. You can selectively choose which Digimon you want to add to your hand from the top 3. As long as you reveal at least 1 Digimon, you can choose which of the Digimon you reveal to add to your hand, which is a pretty good effect. Matt Ishida. I think that Matt Ishida is the next best tamer to use. I think that I wanted more consistency with Rosemon, so I did want another blue tamer. I had considered Takumi Aiba. Takumi Aiba does seem pretty good, but because I think that I'm running 3 Lobomon, I think that 2 Matt Ishidas are the way to go. So I wanted a blue tamer specifically. It's not like Sora and Joe, it does half the effect of Sora and Joe, but it's so cheap. It's only 2 memory, and you know, sometimes I just need 1 extra memory. As we've seen before, the 1 extra memory is useful to me. I don't want to throw in a 4-cost expensive Sora and Joe when I can throw in a cheap 2-cost Matt Ishida. It's good for tempo, and I don't know, it could memory choke my opponent if I just play a 2-cost card instead of a 4-cost card. But because it is 2 costs, it does give me more options available for when to use it, when to hold on to it. I like this card more than the Sora and Joe in this deck. So here are some other side cards that I have considered. Argomon level 6. So again, if you have not seen my previous video, I did run Argomon, but because this deck is so aggressively focused, you can get into your megas like turn 6. Argomon is more of a mid to late game card. It has Digisorption, which is good because you can search for it with Kiwimon, but I do not like how when you first start out, you don't have many suspended Digimon in play. So although it does get security attack +1 for each of your other suspended Digimon, I don't think that it's worth running in this deck. Especially because it only has 11,000 DP. I wanted beefier Digimon. This effectively swings for 15,000 DP, 2 checks, 12,000 DP, which is lower, but you are able to swing over your opponent's Digimon and pierce. 13,000 DP and bounce the Digimon to hand, 12,000 DP, 11,000 DP, but its effect is more useful than the Argomon in my opinion. Davis Momomiya, just in case I want to take out the 2 Matt Ishidas and throw in a 4th Davis Momomiya, but I do like my current setup with the Matt Ishidas, so I think that they're staying in. Takumi Aiba, just in case I want to take out 2 Matt Ishidas, take out the Lobomon, throw in some Takumi Aibas, and then throw in Megadeth. So Takumi Aiba is pretty useful. I figured out that if you're playing this deck against your opponent, and then you're going tall in just a matter of a couple of turns, like you go from level 4 to level 6 in no time, then your opponent might think that if they can't keep up with you by digivolving into their megas, they might want to consider rookie rushing you. So, you know, if they fail to go tall, they might want to go wide. So I thought Takumi Aiba might be useful for this deck in case that happens, but I think that I'm very comfortable with my lineup right now, and I don't think that I need Takumi Aiba in here. Tropical Venom, main effect, if your opponent's Digimon gain, one of your opponent's Digimon gains on deletion lose 2 memory until the end of your turn. So this is pretty useful for memory gain if I ran more Hercules Kabuterimon. So Hercules Kabuterimon has piercing. It's a pretty good card. I did consider running more Hercules Kabuterimons. So if you do not realize the play, you play Tropical Venom, giving one of your opponent's Digimon the ability that when it's deleted, it loses 2 memory. Their owner loses 2 memory. So this gets around memory blockers because you aren't gaining memory, your opponent is losing memory. So if you use that on one of your opponent's Digimon and then you Digivolve into Hercules Kabuterimon, Digiburst 2, suspend the Digimon that you use Tropical Venom on, swing over that Digimon, you get the piercing, but before the piercing kicks in, you do gain the 2 memory from the Tropical Venom. Technically, you don't gain the 2 memory, your opponent loses 2 memory, but it's the same thing. But yeah, you gain the 2 memory from swinging over your opponent's Digimon that has been affected by Tropical Venom. So it's a pretty good option card for you to get more plays during your turn. This does require me to run more Hercules Copy Cherrymon to really have a use in this deck. Tropical Venom is good, but I don't think that I want to change my Mega lineup. I love my Mega lineup currently. So that's why I'm leaving Tropical Venom out. Megadef is a useful card, but because this deck is so focused on aggro, I don't think that Megadef is useful enough for me to warrant putting it in, especially if it's 5 costs to use. I expect to go to my Megas very quickly in this deck. The speed at which you go to your Megas is very insane. So I don't think that I should use Megadef. I want to just keep hitting my opponent very quickly and very hard as soon as possible. GranKuwagamon security attack +1, no strings attached, 15,000 DP. Mega Gargamon security attack +1. It does have a string attached, but you are able to attack for 2 checks the first turn, 2 checks the second turn. So, you know, it's situational. I don't really like it that much for it to have more than 1 spot in this deck, but it is good. Hercules Copy Cherrymon, piercing, so you can get rid of your opponent's Digimon before they can build a good board to combat your Digimon. Imperial Dramon Fire Mode, also to get rid of Digimon, but it is situational. It's based on what your opponent has on board, so it's not that good. I'm using it at just 1 copy just in case I do draw into it and I do need its effect, but it's not good enough to run 2 or more. Rosemon is pretty good. Rosemon can be searched for a Kiwimon. But yeah, this is the main gist of my deck. Matsushita is cheap enough. So even if you don't gain the memory, you are able to just swing with Lobomon next turn, or it's just cheap enough for you to be able to use Hammer Sparks and Ice Wall, or because it's 2 memory, you can memory choke your opponent. I really like this lineup. Arguably, this lineup is better than my BT10 planned lineup. BT10 was more of a defensive mix. It had more removal, but this deck has removal in the form of piercing over suspended Digimon, bouncing Digimon to their hand with Imperial Dramon Fighter Mode. It has Cherrymon that serves as a blocker just in case I need to block something. So I don't think that the other deck is necessarily better. I think that I like this deck. So I don't know. I may make the BT10 deck, but this deck seems a lot more fun. Like, this is like a very fast aggro beatdown deck, and I like this. But anyways, thanks for watching. I will include this deck in the description, and wow, this was a 30-minute video. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.